for your wonderful presentation. I do not want to get into my professional life. Many of you know me already from some of the lectures and the preaching. And many of you have read my book, so you are familiar with my professional theological life, and I don't want to repeat all of that. Rather, I hope that maybe I can entertain you by telling you just off the cuff some of the cultural encounters that I and then we together had to master in our life. Basic is, however, for understanding me, what you all know, the air raid in Dresden when I was 15, which destroyed my hometown, and the total collapse of fascism in Nazi Germany, where I had grown up, and the total collapse of any kind of a rational world with that. And then, in this total chaos in which I was, I found then the way to Jesus Christ, and that became then my conversion, if you will, and aided by good pastors and some teachers. I then became a clergyman. But I don't want to repeat all this, you know that already. Before we met, that was maybe then the first real cultural clash that I had. I was studying in Heidelberg for theology, for being a minister, and I was given a scholarship, not from Fulbright, but from the World Council of Churches, to study for 1 year in the United States. And so I accepted that and was very happy about this. And so then in 1953, in the fall, I landed in Dayton, Ohio, on the campus of the Bone Break Theological Seminary, which was the seminary of the EUB Church, the Evangelical United Brethren Church. Very pious. The people who gave out the scholarship, they wanted to mix the different denominations, and so they took this Lutheran and stuck me there with these real pious EUB people. Yeah. And yet, from a cultural point of view, that was really amazing. It started actually with my arrival. As I came then, I'd taken the Holland-America line to get across the ocean. And then here in this country, I took the train to Dayton. And there the seminary president was at the railroad to pick me up. Wow. This is unbelievable. That would never have happened in Germany. A seminary president would never go to the railroad to pick up a lousy theological student from the train and carry his suitcases. And so, I mean, that really made a very, very big impression on me. Yeah. However, and that I think I also referred to in my book, as I then got settled in the seminary, I was a passionate smoker. And I had discovered already in New York that the price for cigarettes was half of what I paid in Germany. So I had a pack of all the popular brands of cigarettes all over with me. There was Camel and Chesterfield and Pall Mall. What else was there? Lucky Strike. And in my talk with the dean of that seminary, Dean Bruce Bainey, at the end, after we had cleared up what classes I should take, he said, "Oh, by the way, Manfred, now I appreciate that you are Lutheran and you have, of course, different rules in your church from what we have, but we as EUB, we do not smoke and we do not drink. And so I hope that you would abstain while you are here with us. You know, we have people from our churches coming, visiting the seminary, and they don't know the difference between you and our students. And if they see you then smoking and stuff like this, that would cause a lot of embarrassment for us." I was shocked. I thought, oh my God, here I am in the land of freedom. That's what they had been pounding into our heads all after the war. That we dumb Germans, we just didn't know how to handle freedom. But of course, the American was the pinnacle of freedom. And the first thing they tell me is, I can't smoke. Good grief. The way, and I then told the dean, I said, well, I'll see what I can do for you. I didn't want to bind myself with a solid promise. And so what I did was, I had, of course, cigarettes in my room. And my roommate was very understanding. He didn't care. And so sometimes I smoked in my room. And I also had so and so many people in the seminary, some of those EUB students, coming by, say, "Hey, Manfred, you got a smoke for me?" Yeah. But the way I solved it principally was, I was basically smoking a pipe, and my pipe lasted actually long enough, about 40 minutes, to walk around the entire campus. And so in the morning, when I had an hour off, I would just step one step off the campus. I was no longer on the territory of the EU, of the Bone Break Seminary. And I would light my pipe with great delight and then puff my pipe as I walked around the campus. And that was about 40 minutes. It worked out real well. Of course, when I then went into the classroom, some of the profs there stood there and thought that was a funny smell coming from me. All right. So these were some of the cultural impressions that I gathered. Another thing was, while they were wonderful people, by the way. I am so grateful to them still to this day for their hospitality, for their friendship, and for what I could learn also from them. But they were very strict in their morals. However, they organized a ball, dancing, for whatever occasion. And they said, "Manfred, you got to come to our dances. It's really great." Okay, sure. So we went dancing. But there, I all of a sudden watched these morally upright students as they then sneaked with their girlfriends off the dancing floor, and went down into the car, the parking lot, and then they started kissing each other and necking each other in a totally dedicated, full way. I mean, in the German universities, there were maybe chemists or biologists, the medical students too. They were pretty outrageous, but no theologian, no philosopher, or any of the other disciplines would have gone that wild. So that was very, very interesting. Yeah. Now, in order to get by with my own values, every once so often I managed then to get away from Dayton and hitch a ride over to Springfield, Ohio. And in Springfield, we had a Lutheran seminary. And so every once so often, I would skip out and go over to my Lutheran fellows in Springfield. And there I could drink beer and I could smoke and all this. And what was good about that was that I made the acquaintance of the dean, the Lutheran dean there, Elmer Ellsworth Flack. He became a very good close friend, and in a way then guided and steered me also later on through my life because of that. Well, that was before I met Marianne. And then I got on the Krebsholm, and she told you already how we met in the dining room. And yes, I was smitten. I was really smitten. No, I didn't kiss her. We didn't hold hands. At that point, she was formally engaged to a young man here in Iowa. And well, and that bothered me. And yet I didn't want to break this. I didn't want to break in there. But we had long, long discussions. Anyhow, we then got to Germany, and after 10, 11 days on the high seas, with nothing to do, moonlight on the ocean, the band playing in the background. I mean, just like in a Hollywood movie. But then I had to readjust to Germany. I had been away now for a year, but I really had to work to overcome this culture shock now to live again in Germany. And my mother was upset with the clothes that I was wearing. She said, well, this loud color shirt that you are trying to wear doesn't go with those pants. Yeah. And I said, I don't know. I said, that's what I have been wearing now in the last year, and I feel comfortable, and that's it. My local pastor, Pastor Degenhardt, now he was not happy with me. He said, well, Manfred, you are now back here in Germany, and you have to learn now again to step a little shorter, take shorter steps. And I said, no, Pastor, I'm not going to take shorter steps. That's why I went away. Anyhow, I had gotten my Master of Divinity at the seminary in Dayton. But now I worked for the German degree and did my examens there and was then ordained in southern Germany in the Palatinate. And there I actually had been thinking of becoming an intern or a vicar or maybe even a pastor of a small country church or what. But no, I was called in to the church headquarters, and they said, well, we have a special request. You have been now in the United States, you know those Americans and their ways, and we have here a job that we have to fill. We have here now in Germany the labor service units. These were German units of German young men who helped doing the work for the American military, for the Army, for the Air Force, and so forth. As guards, as mechanics, in the medical field, truck drivers, and so forth. And so the church officials said, well, they are living in barracks, they are uniformed. That was actually sort of the beginning of the new German army that was now beginning to be built up. And we need somebody as a chaplain for them. Are you ready to do that? And so I said, well, it comes to me as a surprise. I said, could I just do this for 3 months on a probationary basis? You know, I don't know yet. Okay, fine. And so I did this. First in K-Town in Kaiserslautern. I think some of you, one or two, have been stationed in K-Town, but you were then in Landstuhl. Well, that's in southern Germany, and it was really a town overcrowded with GIs, with Americans. Yeah. And then after some years in Kaiserslautern, I was then transferred over to Ramstein Air Base, to the Air Force, a labor service. And I must say I really took to that work. I liked it very much. I had a lot of travel to do to different places in southern Germany where they had labor service units and visit with them. And that is where I was then. And yeah, we had this exchange of letters. We still have the correspondence in a shoebox of 3 years. And the letters got longer and longer over the years. And I was always looking then for this light blue envelope, the airmail envelope from the United States. Ah, there, she wrote again. That was great. And we did quite a bit of exchange. I don't know if you would ask me, well, today, of course, they wouldn't do that anymore. Today, you email each other. Huh? But the email is not a letter. In the letter, I mean, if you write 5, 6, 7 pages, you can really commit yourself. You can pull yourself out into this in a way which you would never do in an email, I think. But anyhow. So I had this very strong feeling for her. But I didn't know. I mean, we hadn't seen each other now for 3 years. So I wrote her and I said, well, I don't have much money. But I think, now we have to see each other. There's no question about it. Either I come to New York and see you in New York, or you come over here and I can put you up with friends. I think it's cheaper if you come to Germany than for me coming to New York and trying then to stay there for 2 or 3 weeks in a hotel. And so she came. And she told you how she came over to Germany on this freighter ship. Well, and all right, yeah, sure. I did not feel like doing now this dramatic, this melodramatic. Will you marry me? God, that's not me. And so I just said to her, I said, well, you know, I know one thing is for sure, we're going to get married. I didn't even ask her. But the question is, you want to get married now or you want to do it later? And so then we decided to get married very quickly. Although it took some 6 weeks or so to get all the paperwork done.
Tell them about the consul in Frankfurt.
Yeah, well, we had now 2 governments to deal with, you know, and the American consulate in Frankfurt. They had all kinds of questions about me, whether I had been a member of the Communist Party and stuff like that. And it was kind of funny. Whenever we went to the consulate, I was there in my labor service uniform, you know, with my captain boss and all this. And there, in the waiting room, there were all the German war brides. Normally, the pattern there was that the American GIs, they had gotten a German girl somewhere, and they wanted to get married. But the girl was always a German, and the husband would be American. And here, it was just the other way around. Yeah. So then we got married, and it was great. My mother hated it. I think she had anticipated some of this stuff that was building up there. And for her, this was a day of tragedy. But I said, so what? And then we took off and had our honeymoon in France, then Strasbourg, and in Alsace, and so forth. But the question was now, where should we be? Should we stay in Germany? And Marianne said, I love Germany. It's a great country. I like your people. I like the scenery. I like everything. And she speaks fluent German. And so she said, it's entirely up to you. And so I said, well, all right. And the thing is this, I said, you know, I would like to go back to the States for some years. There's still a couple of questions I have. How the American church finances itself and all this, that I would like to study a little bit more. So I wouldn't mind going back to the States for just a few years. And so then we took off. And I wrote to different church presidents. The Lutherans then still had presidents and not bishops. And one of them in West Virginia was very, very nice. And he said, yeah, we have here one situation that you could try out. Why don't you come over? And that was in Grafton, West Virginia. Anybody knows Grafton? No. Grafton is a small town. Originally, I think they had maybe 20,000 people. By the time we were coming there, they were, I think, down to 5,000 or something like this. The poverty had really hit West Virginia, Appalachia, very, very hard. Coal was no longer a big business. Many of the young people had left the town and had gone north looking for work. So Grafton was a town with predominantly elderly people, retired people. The church was struggling like crazy to stay alive. And my bishop, my church president, synodical president, George Wyrick, a wonderful man, he said, well, Manfred, there isn't too much that you can do bad there. There isn't much you can destroy anymore. Yeah. Except for one thing. Do not move into that parsonage that they have. If you do that, you won't make it there. All right, so we came there. He said, we have arranged for the time being that you and your wife, you can stay in a small apartment with one of the church members. But see what you can do, but don't move into this parsonage. So when we got there and we looked at the parsonage, it was pitiful. The balconies sagging and everything. I mean, the thing was ready to be torn down. And so I said, all right, fine. So we stayed there. And we had this small apartment with Mr. Kuntz. And Mr. Kuntz, of course, said, well, no, you should really move in there. He was on the church council. But I stuck to my ground, and in the long run then, it was a 2-point parish. It was Grafton and Newburgh. Newburgh had another congregation. And between the two, then, they bought a new house. Yeah, very nice. And there then my mother came one day and visited us. That was after our daughter was born there, Andrea. So that was very lovely. And my mother then overcame her misgivings to America which had stolen her son. That's how she felt. Yeah. But she overcame that now. And actually, I loved those people. As we were struggling with the money, and the treasurer of the congregation soon enough came and said, well, Pastor, I have a question. We don't have much money left in the bank account. What do you want me to pay? You want me to pay for the heating of the church or your salary? That's how tough it was. And I said, well, first, I said, no. I mean, if you don't heat the church, people won't come at all. So go ahead and pay for the heating. But then the next month he came again. And when he came the third month, I said, well, no, I said, poverty is a nice thing. It's certainly a good Christian virtue, but it should be spread out. It shouldn't hit only one guy. So if you cannot pay my salary, I want to have a meeting with all the people of the congregation. And so then we talked about this, and we worked then ways out, and were then able to buy a new parsonage. One thing that helped in that was that a Lutheran congregation here in York, Pennsylvania, they had heard about me, and they sent me a letter and said, well, would you come? We need an assistant pastor, and we would...
Click, wasn't it?
Pastor Click is right, Pastor Click. And we'll be very, very happy to have you as our second pastor. And so I hadn't answered that yet. And when we had the congregational meeting, Now that was really against all the rules, and I knew it, but I did it. I said to the congregation, they were all sitting there, and they were divided. They weren't sure that they wanted to buy this parsonage. And I said to them, no, you know, vote how you feel. But I do want you to know, I have here a letter from such and such Lutheran church in New York. I haven't answered it yet. And they want me to come and blah, 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 blah. And so if you vote against the parsonage, I'll go to York. Now that was blackmail. And that is not a way to run a church. But I did it, and lo and behold, they bought the new house. All right. So yeah, we have to hurry up now. We're still in Grafton. However, one thing that bothered me was the many different denominations that we had, and we met at the Ministerial Association with all the other pastors of the Baptists and the Episcopalians and the Presbyterians and the Methodists and so forth. And I said, no, where are they all coming from? I was not really prepared for those. And I said, well, they obviously are also Christians. And so then I had this strong desire to do a little bit more study about the Reformation in England. And there, this Dean Flack, you still remember? Elmer Ellsworth Flack? He still was in touch with me. And he said, well, Manfred, you should go for your doctoral degree in Hartford Seminary Foundation. And so then we left. And it was a very hard departure for me, because I really had come to love those people very, very much. And then we went to Hartford, and I worked on my doctorate in church history. And it turned out that I actually, in my doctoral dissertation, wrote on Luther. Yeah. And that was great. And as I was just about done with it, the Lutheran Church headquarters in New York said, well, we need a professor for church history in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And would you be ready to go? You would have to teach there in Spanish, however. Well, so we talked about it. We now had 2 children, Andrea and Chris, our girl and our boy. And Marianne, of course, she said, oh, heck, why not? Sounds interesting. So we took off for Argentina. And then we were 5.5 years in Latin America. And that, of course, was now, again, a completely new cultural experience. Totally different from what we had lived through so far. All of a sudden, we were the rich people. Whew! And most of the people that we worked with were poor. They were really poor.
Well, they were paid in pesos and we were paid in dollars.
Yeah, they were paid in pesos and we were paid in dollars. But they were wonderful. We lived then outside of Buenos Aires in José de Paz. We had to learn Spanish real quick. We had 4 months for a crash course in Mexico, in Cuernavaca. Yeah. And then I had to start teaching in Spanish church history. So that was a stretch, I mean, but we did it. And one thing that, one thing that was very much on my mind was, however, what is this Lutheran seminary doing here in Buenos Aires? We had 20 students, and the president of the seminary, Dr. Belaleshko, he had this vision of developing the Lutheran Center for Latin America just outside of Buenos Aires. Then he had gotten the finances for a very nice campus and seminary buildings, and also buildings for the faculty like us, from the Lutheran World Federation and also from the American Lutherans. So money was no project for them, was no problem. But I had been a pastor in America. I knew how tough it is to raise those dollars, to send them overseas. I felt offended. Now, we had 20 students. We had 20 employees, secretaries, cleaning ladies, cooks, what have you. And we had 20 on the faculty. That's crazy. Now, after a little while there, I became the dean of our seminary, and I could work together then with another seminary, not a Lutheran, but the Evangelical General Protestant Seminary in Buenos Aires. And there I managed then to build up a combination of the two schools. And there was a lot of politicking and also a lot of fights, but it came off, okay. And that was then called ISETET, Instituto Superior de Estudios Teológicos. So that was very good. And while I was there in Buenos Aires, I also was then asked by the Lutheran World Federation this one time to go to Medellin, Colombia, to this one bishops' conference of the Roman Catholic Church. That they had a very important meeting there in Medellin. And so, and I should represent the Lutherans as an ecumenical observer. And I did this. I met the Pope Paul VI, in Bogota. I was fully involved in this bishops' conference. It was fantastic. It was revolutionary. They changed everything around. And that was where the Latin American liberation theology was born in 1968. And I was there representing the Lutherans, and there were some other ecumenical observers, an Episcopalian, a Methodist, and some others. And we then wrote a carefully crafted paper to the presidents of that bishops' conference that we wanted to receive Holy Communion as non-Catholics. And that was then a no-no. But we argued quite well our position, that we felt moved by love, by amor, Christian amor, and therefore we request that and we got that through. And that was interesting by itself. Then the final Mass that they held, where we then also took Holy Communion, I knew that there were some TV people. One of them came to me. He was originally from Holland, and he had been a Catholic priest, but had left the church. And he said, well, we know what you're planning to do. I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you're going to do it even if I catch you in my TV camera. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just doing what Christians normally do. And you get all worked up here. And then he did it. And then I received Holy Communion with the Catholics. And that, of course, caused some uproar. I got then a letter from Geneva, from the Lutheran World Federation. What's going on down there? But that was good.
It's 8 o'clock, so...
Yeah, okay, I have to hurry up. Let me try to finish it up. One thing while we're still in Latin America that I have to touch on very briefly is, I think I met down there, I must have met the present Pope down there, Pope Franciscus. Because our Lutheran seminary was only 5 kilometers away from the Jesuits' seminary, Colegio Maximo in San Miguel, and I was always over in San Miguel. And when I came back from this conference in Medellin, I held lectures, and I think Marianne discovered the copy of the lecture that I held there in 1968 at the Jesuit College. There was nobody from the Jesuit College at that bishops' conference. And so I was there, and I gave a lecture on that bishops' conference there to the Jesuits, and I'm sure that the present Pope, Jorge Bergoglio, must have been there. Okay, I should come now to an end. We have only done half of our life.
That's why I wrote mine out.
Coming back from Latin America, we were then, for many happy, blessed years, at Stanford University in California. And I was there the Lutheran campus pastor. It was a great time. We had our children there. That's more or less where Chris and Andrea really grew up in California at Stanford University. And then I got homesick, and very badly, for the first time in about 20 years. And Marianne said, well, if that's the case, we just got to go back to Germany. And that's what we did. We left the kids here in the States. They didn't want to come with us. And we too went to Germany. And I had this church in Berlin. In the Berlin, which was then still a divided city. And I was in this part of the city of Berlin that was torn up with a lot of social conflict. The one problem in particular was the restoration of old buildings. Many of the big building companies had acquired the property rights to whole blocks of the city, of houses, that they wanted to tear down and then build new so-called modern houses with lower ceilings and more concentrated, where you can raise higher rents. And their German what do you call them, Hausbesetzer,
Squatters.
squatters. The German young people would move into these houses and squat them illegally, and they couldn't be thrown out that simply, and blocked these big housing projects. And I had in my parish there in Berlin, when I started out, 25 big family apartment buildings that were squatted illegally by illegal young Germans. And I developed a very interesting ministry with these people. One time when the police then threw this one house, they cleared this one house and threw all these were punks. They threw them out of the house, and they were then that morning in front of my church door. And I took them into my church, and they slept then a night or two in my big church in Berlin, and then we had gotten some big army tents, and we built a tent city between this venerable church edifice and the Berlin Wall. We were right next to the Berlin Wall, and between these two, we had then the tents put up, and there they were for 3 weeks or 3 months. And we forced then the Senate. Actually, I talked with the bishop, with the mayor von Weizsäcker in Berlin, and I could convince him then. He was a very good Christian. And so they let these kids, these punks, back into the house. And today these houses have now all been renovated without having been torn down. Well, anyhow, I should stop here. There is so much more that we could do. After that time in Berlin, we came back, Marianne and I, and I had then a church in Manhattan, which was very, very interesting. And we were then, 11 years? Something like 11 years, pastor in Manhattan. And then we moved into the Poconos, and I had a parish as I retired, and that was nice. And in 2007, we moved here. So that's it.